So I love everything about comic books. I love the art, I love reading it, I love different writers, different characters, everything about comic books I think to me is just incredible. So yeah, I wanted to discuss my favourite comic books of all time. I've got a big deck here, which I'll blur out so no one can see. One of the books on this list, actually, I do not have. I read it online illegally. But yeah, comic books have been a really big part of my life for a very, very long time. I'm afraid I am one of those people who will say, actually, the comics are better. And yeah, today I'm just going to run through some of my favourite ones of all time, why I think they're good, why I think you should read them. So yeah, without further ado, let's get through this mighty stack. It's not even that many, to be fair. So first up on the list, we have The Immortal Iron Fist, The Last Iron Fist Story, by Ed Brubaker, Matt Fraction, and David Adger. Now, this comic book is part of a wider series, like most comic books, but I have the second one on my shelf up there, and yeah, I just think that this is a perfect way to get into reading Iron Fist. I'm personally a massive fan of Iron Fist as a character. I think Kunlun and the Dragon and all that stuff is just sick. He's a very underrated Marvel character, and I think more people should read him. I think the show did him quite dirty, although I don't think the show was that bad, as bad as people often make out online. But yeah, definitely wasn't what we really want out of an Iron Fist adaptation, and I do think a more updated MCU reboot movie could be something really cool, maybe tie in with Shang-Chi. That kind of idea would be great. But yeah, I don't want to spoil too much about this, but I think the art style is incredible by David Adger. I really like his work, but specifically the writing by Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction, who I'm not sure about Ed Brubaker, but I think Matt Fraction did the Hawkeye comics that inspired the Hawkeye show, and we all know those are great. So yeah, the writing in this book is really, really strong throughout the whole series. It takes a really interesting turn because you aren't introduced to Iron Fist straight away as you know him. It's not Danny Rand, it's an older version, one of the previous Iron Fists. I just think that's a really interesting way to do it, is to like bring in an older one, show you the new one, and it's just got a very cool dynamic throughout the story, and yeah, I really couldn't recommend this series enough. It's a really, really great read. It's quick and easy like most comic books. I think the villains in this are really strong as well. They kind of do the classic Iron Fist. I'm not going to spoil it really, but if you know Iron Fist as a character, you know who the villain most likely is. But yeah, there's not really much more to say on this. I just think everyone should give it a go. But yeah, what are you gonna lose? Iron Fist, read this shit. Okay. Next up, switching from Marvel to DC, we have The Killing Joke by Alan Moore. Now, I'm sure everyone's heard of this. It's one of the most famous comic books of all time because it's kind of just the Joker's origin story, which it is, but I do think there is a lot more to it than that. I think this book has a very interesting descent into madness that you follow. I think some of the strongest parts are with Jim Gordon and how they handle his character and what they do with Barbara. Not gonna spoil, if you know, you know. The way they handle Jim Gordon and Joker's dynamic, I guess you could say, and certain locations they're in throughout this book, how they handle just Joker's origin as well is great. Like, it's been said so much, but they're not wrong. People aren't wrong. This is a great book. It really does dive into Joker's origin story very well. There's nothing that it just does. I think the way Batman is presented in this is really great as well. Obviously, it is a Joker comic, and you're reading it for that reason, but I think Batman himself is just great in this. The way he bounces off with the Joker is just great, as usual. Some of the appearances from other villains are really good as well, like the Penguin, but yeah, this book is just really strong, and it's a really easy way to get into comics. I think this is probably a lot of people's first reads when it comes to getting into comic books, but yeah, can't recommend it enough. If you look carefully, you can notice that this is a German version of The Killing Joke, because my girlfriend got me this as a gift from Sweden? Not Sweden. Where'd she go? Switzerland. I did have a copy of this before in English, but I gave it away to a library when I was younger because I thought it was a really nice thing to do. But to be honest, I kind of regret it. So yeah, Batman, The Killing Joke. This is a great Joker origin story, and I think the way it handles certain things to do with the Bat family, can't be too specific because it's spoilery, but it's really good. Read it. Read it. Next up on the list of my favourite comic books of all time, we have Infinity Gauntlet. Now, I know this is quite popular, but to me, this book really, really got me into Marvel comics. I was much more into Batman comics. I just think they're a lot stronger a lot of the time, but Infinity Gauntlet is incredible. I read this at around about the time when Infinity War was coming out and Endgame and all that kind of stuff, because everyone was like, oh, this is the comic that it's based on. But it's so different. And obviously, I think the Infinity War movie ending is one of the best Marvel endings of all time. But God, this book is great. The way they do the portal scene in this with Doctor Strange, and, you know, just the amount of characters that there are in this that hadn't been established in the MCU, so they couldn't use them for that story. They are used here, and it's great. You've got Adam Warlock, who's like literally one of the main parts of this story, and he is so good in this. Thanos' motivations in this, not being, you know, oh, I want to have half of everything and be nice to everyone and, you know, people are all dying. It's actually just he wants to have sex with death. I think that's funny and sick, and I like this book. This book is really, really good. Mephisto is so cool in this. A little highlight as well, Spider-Man is really, really good in this book. I love Spider-Man in this book. I think the way he talks is very just on point with the character, but I think the art style is so awesome. It's very like 80s, it's so colourful. Like, you could open any page of this, it probably won't show very well on camera, but like, it's just so bright and colourful. It's incredible. This book is so good. Okay, that was a pretty bad page because it's all black. I'm usually not a massive fan of big cosmic stories, but this one really, really got me, and I love Infinity Gauntlet. I would love to reread this soon, actually. I think Silver Surfer's really cool in it as well. Read Infinity Gauntlet. Shit is cool. God, kind of regretting this throwing thing that I've started throughout this video. Next up on the list, we have a classic, Frank Miller's Daredevil Born Again. We all know this shit is gas! That shit is fire! It's so good. It is why, well, it's not the only reason why, but obviously the Daredevil show is incredible. We know that. I love it. It's my favorite show of all time. Daredevil is amazing. He's my favorite Marvel character, probably my favorite character in fiction. This book is the Daredevil story. I really want to read Daredevil Yellow because I've heard amazing things about that, but this is the Daredevil story. Kingpin is so menacing. I'll give a little synopsis to really pitch this to you, but basically, Kingpin finds out Matt's identity, or Daredevil's identity being Matt, and basically just ruins his life. Like, just goes out of his way to ruin his life, but from the shadows, so that Daredevil doesn't know it's him. And there's a very poignant point in this book where Daredevil finds out who is behind the ruining of his life, and there's some very, very cool stuff. I do think the ending is a little bit weak at parts. I guess you could say third act, the final fight, I don't know, in the city, is a bit random. I feel like the villain of it is a bit random. Obviously I know he's hired by Kingpin, but it just feels a bit like, okay, this guy's in it, and now it's all going crazy. I really like the more in-depth character moments between Matt and Foggy, and I just think that this book is really, really worth a read. Read this shit. It is amazing. The art style, the way they handle Daredevil's sonar abilities in comics, and you actually get to see it through the pink and stuff. The way they use speech bubbles in this book is really, really impressive, and I think it's just great. So, yeah, Daredevil Born Again, read it. Okay, we are down to our final 3. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to go in a specific order, but these last 3 are now being ranked. Like, these are my top 3 comic books of all time. So yeah, final 3. Here we have World War Hulk. Now, you probably wouldn't think this would be on my list. It's not a very popular one, but I genuinely think this is one of the most entertaining and, like, enthralling comic books I've ever read, ever. It is so good. If you liked Thor Ragnarok and you liked the bits that Hulk is in Thor Ragnarok, it takes those bits and makes you realize what you were missing. This book is so fun and good and does so much for Hulk and his character. Comic action is at a serious high in this. This is so cool. The dialogue, the art, it all feels so on brand. The big double page splashes are so good in this book. It is just so fun to read. Quite a bit of a longer one as well. I don't know if you can really tell on here, but it's quite a bit longer. Let me cover my eye because that's how my autofocus works. But yeah, it's quite thick, it's quite long. But yeah, this book is just, it's so fun and so sick. There's not really much more I can say, I guess, in all these rankings, but like, wow, what they do for Hulk's character, and seeing the true anger of Hulk in this is just incredible. This book is so fun. Please read it. For quite a long book, I got through it in one reading session, which for me is quite obscure. I like to, pace it out over time. Yeah, I could not put this down. Read World War Hulk. This shit is so good. Sick. the penultimate comic book on this list, last but not least, if you will, we have... I don't have a physical copy of it, but it is my second favorite comic book of all time, and it is Moonlight by Lemire and Smallwood. I think this really did something to me. I'd say this comic book is the reason why I have a Moon Knight tattoo. I would say not just favorites, but this is genuinely one of the best comic books of all time. One of the best comic book character explorations, and you don't really have to know too much about Moon Knight going in. It's not really like, I wouldn't say this is the first thing you should read when starting Moon Knight, but wow, this story goes up and down and up and down and just leaves you on... This is Moon Knight. This is everything about him. It's crazy, chaotic, it's batshit insane at parts. There's like 6 chapters. Well, not 6 chapters, sorry. I've been reading too much actual books. Issues, that's the word. There's like 6 issues of this, out of 18, I think, and those middle 6 make absolutely no sense. They are completely insane and make you want to put it down. Now, I know that sounds bad, but trust me, holy shit, the ending makes you realize, oh my god, getting through all that craziness was so worth it. You've probably seen the panel, the iconic one of all the different personalities with Khonshu. Not going to spoil it, but the way they handle their relationship, Mark's origin story, everything in this book is just, it's Moon Knight. This is Moon Knight. You know, the show tried to take bits and failed. I have the whole video on that, what it did wrong, but this book is Moon Knight. This is everything about the character done perfectly. I would not change anything about this story. The first time I read it, obviously I don't have a physical copy, so I actually read it illegally, but I have never so fast regretted that because I wish I could have read this physically. It would have been so much cooler. Let's throw this one. Getting on to our last comic book of this video, and what is my personal favorite comic book of all time. Can we get a little drum roll, a little drum roll? Who's drum rolling? You drum rolling? Cool. We have... Oh, I hit my mic. Batman The Long Halloween. Incredible. It's so good. Firstly, the art. Tim Sale is my favorite comic book artist of all time. I can't explain it, but the way he draws Joker's smile, I'll show something on screen, but the way he draws Joker's smile is like a whale's teeth, like bristles, and it's incredible. So there is a murder on Halloween night, and obviously Batman's the world's greatest detective, so he has to try and figure out who did it, why, the motive, all those kind of things. But along the way, he encounters all his most famous villains. And as a firm believer that Batman's rogues gallery is the best part of Batman, this book gives you everything you want. It is so good. It is so fun. It is so mysterious and has this like detective noir jazz crime vibe. It's so sick. If you love the Batman 2022 like I do, I also have a tattoo of that. If you love that film, this is that. This is like, it's just the same vibe. Obviously you could read Batman Year One, that's obviously a lot more similar in what it was taken from, but this is incredible. I don't really know what else there is to say about it. It's just so well told. I would say this is the perfect story accompanied by the perfect art. That's about as perfect as a comic book gets. Good art, good story. That's kind of comic books as a whole. So Batman The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb, illustrated by Tim Sale, is the best comic book of all time. For me personally, possibly a fact. This is a mafia crime thriller epic. I don't know what else to say. This is so good. This is my favorite comic book of all time for a great reason. I know you don't really know me or know my reasonings, but just trust me. If you have not read this and can go in spoiler-free, this is incredible. There are some shots in here of certain villains like Riddler, Scarecrow, my favorite Mad Hatter, that are all-timers. This is the comic book that made Tim Sale my favorite artist and made me go down a rabbit hole of reading his stuff. It inspired Arkham Knight as a game. It's basic. Arkham Knight takes place on one night. It inspired the Batman because the Batman starts on Halloween night. This is essential to any Batman reader's guide, anything like that. Batman The Long Halloween, the final book to put onto my pile. But yeah, that about covers my favorite comic books of all time. I really hope you enjoyed this video, but please do let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are, what your rankings are, what you think of my rankings. I want to know it all. I love talking in the comments. So yeah, that's about it. Love you all, stay safe, and peace out.